The man opened his eyes. He sat up and took stock of his current situation. He was wearing a blue cloak, long pants, and a tight leather breastplate. None of it was familiar to him. Around him was a bamboo thicket that gave way to a strand of palms. Following the sound of crashing waves, he found himself on an endless beach, soft white sand beneath his boots, bright waters crashing at the shore, and a lush jungle forming a wall at the edge of the sand. He called out, panic creeping in as he received no response. He didn't know where he was or how he had gotten there. He didn't know why his head hurt or why he was covered in bruises. He didn't even know his own name. Desperate to escape, the man called upon instinct and grasped at the feeling of away. As he pushed toward that feeling, he felt his physical body begin to dissolve, as if it were wavering between one place and another. But it only lasted a moment before he was suddenly and forcefully pushed back through the metaphysical door he had begun to step through, and he crashed back down to the sand, with nothing to show for his efforts but a strange triangular rune that now floated above him. Hello there. If you'll recall from last episode, the Gatewatch went head-to-head with the Elder Dragon Planeswalker Nikobolos on the plane of Amonkhet. To say he wiped the floor with them would be putting it lightly, but each Planeswalker managed to escape with their life. Jace Beleren was the first to leave, after Nikobolos squeezed his mind like a stress ball. He involuntarily planeswalked to the plane of Ixalan to avoid his mind being entirely obliterated. There, he found himself with total retrograde amnesia. In other words, he couldn't remember anything about himself or his past life. And although the idea of planeswalking was still familiar to him, much like how one never forgets how to ride a bike, something wasn't letting him planeswalk away, so he was stuck on Ixalan. So, if Ixalan's the place to be, before we continue with Jace's story, let's dive in and take a look at this unfamiliar world that he found himself plopped onto. The plane of Ixalan is generally analogous to the real world during Europe's Age of Exploration, and consists primarily of two large continents. Torrezon, representative of the Old World, and Ixalan, representative of the New World. The latter continent, naturally, is where our story takes place. And yes, both the plane and the continent are called Ixalan, and yes, that can get mildly confusing at times, but don't worry about it, moving on. These two continents, and the surrounding waters, are home to 4 different warring factions: the Sun Empire, the Brazen Coalition, the Legion of Dusk, and the River Heralds. What are these factions warring over, you might ask? Well, each group is on the hunt for the lost golden city of Orazca, and the legendary artifact that is said to reside there, the Immortal Sun. This ancient artifact was said to give its wielder unimaginable power, and the idea persists amongst the people of Ixalan that whoever controlled Orazca and the Immortal Sun would hold dominion over the entire plane. So, let's familiarize ourselves with each of those factions real quick. To start, the Sun Empire is exactly what the name implies, an empire that worships the sun. Specifically, 3 separate aspects of the sun: creating, sustaining, and consuming, represented by 3 different aspects of the deity known as the Threefold Sun. Loosely based on real-world Aztec culture, the Sun Empire is made up of several city-states and a capital, Pachatupa, all located on the continent of Ixalan. The denizens of the Sun Empire are almost entirely human, but these humans are notable for the fact that they command and ride dinosaurs. Yes, dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are actually the dominant form of animal life on Ixalan, and they, like real dinosaurs, come in all different shapes and sizes. Dinos, everywhere you look. As a quick side note here, in real life, animals such as flying pterosaurs and aquatic plesiosaurus are not actually considered dinosaurs. In the Magic multiverse, they are, mostly for simplicity's sake regarding creature typing. Anyway, these dinosaurs are not actually domesticated, and are still very much dangerous wild animals, but the Sun Empire bends them to their will, using them as mounts, military weapons, and beasts of burden. The Sun Empire's first ruler, Chikanti Intli, was actually the founder of Orazca, which became the Empire's prosperous center. Generations later, Chikanti's descendant, Emperor Apatsek Intli, was gifted the Immortal Sun by a mysterious winged beast, and he helped to grow Orazca to the golden city it would come to be known as. However, he wielded the power of the sun recklessly, without wisdom or restraint. Devastation and ruin followed in his wake, and eventually, the immortal sun was taken away from the Sun Empire by the Winged Beast, and they were forced out of Orazca. The current Emperor, Apacek Indli III, has brought about an age of expansion and conquest for the Empire, and he seeks Orazca and the Immortal Sun to regain the lost power that the Sun Empire once held. Moving on, we have the Brazen Coalition, which is actually less a specific group and more a general name given to the pirates that sail Ixalan's seas, plundering and treasure hunting, as pirates are often known to do. The Brazen Coalition was originally formed when a group of humans was forced out of Torrezon, and, deciding not to be beholden to any empire, chose to forge their own independence on the open seas. Eventually, a modicum of order was established by Admiral Beckett Brass, who, aboard her ship the Scourge, amassed the Coalition's largest fleet of ships, known now as the Fathom Fleet. And although the Brazen Coalition was named in her honor, there are many individual ships and fleets that are not under Brass's command, such as the Leviathan's Wrath, captained by Ripley Vance, and the Storm Fleet, led by Captain Lannery Storm. Members of the Brazen Coalition are by and large outcasts in the eyes of other societies, and include all sorts of humans, but also orcs, goblins, and sirens. Individual ships and fleets of the Brazen Coalition separately seek Orazca and the Immortal Sun as the greatest treasure that Ixalan has to offer. But also, some humans believe that its power could be used to help take back their ancestral lands in Torrezon. Take their lands back from whom, you might ask? Well, that would be our next faction, the Legion of Dusk, who are basically vampire conquistadors. The Legion of Dusk is a nation based out of Torrezon and is led by the iron-fisted Queen Meralda. Long ago, the nation that would one day become the Legion of Dusk was actually the first group to have control over the Immortal Sun. It was treated with great reverence and remained under the protection of holy custodians in a mountaintop monastery. Eventually, a jealous king attacked the monastery and tried to take the sun, but it was stolen away by that winged beast I mentioned earlier. One of the sun's keepers, Alenda, survived the attack on the monastery and followed the beast westward in hopes to reclaim the sun. In the west, she made a deal with the bat god Aklazots and harnessed his dark magic, taking on the burden of immortality to forever continue her pursuit of the immortal sun, thus becoming Ixalan's first vampire. When Alenda eventually returned home, she introduced the vampirism process, known as the Rite of Redemption, to the nobles of Torrezon so that they could join her in her search. After which, she left Torrezon once more, and has not been seen since. Nowadays, performing the Rite of Redemption is the norm amongst the Legion's nobles, and Alenda herself is greatly revered. So revered, in fact, that a religion has formed around her, the Church of the Dusk Rose. In the name of this church, and in hopes of finding the sun, the Legion continually expands outwards in a constant bloodthirsty fervor. And when I say bloodthirsty, I of course mean that literally. They're vampires, after all. However, they only drink the blood of the guilty, meaning criminals, heretics, and rebels against the state. They also, as part of their religion, regularly undergo what's called the Blood Fast, in which a vampire starves themselves for extended periods of time. During this time, the vampire enters a state known as the Rapture, in which they gain heightened senses and hyper-awareness, but also revert to being almost animalistic, attacking anything in sight. The Legion of Dusk seeks the Immortal Sun not only to find Alenda, but also in hopes that its power could grant them the immortality of vampirism without the need to consume blood. And lastly, we have the River Heralds. The River Heralds are merfolk who seek to preserve the delicate balance of nature and drive out the invaders who would seek to conquer it. The Heralds consist of 9 nomadic tribes on the continent of Ixalan, 1 tribe for each tributary of Ixalan's great river. These tribes are fragmented into groups called bands, consisting of a dozen or so members, who are led by a shaman called a Shaper, who uses magic to wield the elements around them. These Shapers are so powerful, they were once able to stand up to the military might of the Sun Empire and force them out of Orazca. But as the Sun Empire has expanded and the River Heralds' numbers have dwindled, it has become harder and harder for them to fight back against the Empire's conquests. The River Heralds are actually the current keepers of the Immortal Sun, as it was granted to them after it was taken from the Sun Empire. But in order to maintain balance and to avoid the disasters that had befallen the Sun's previous wielders, the Heralds decided it would be better for no one to control the Sun. Thus, they worked to ensure that the city of Orazca remains hidden to all, even themselves. However, there are some in the River Heralds that believe that using the power of the Immortal Sun is the only way to keep the intruding Sun Empire off their land. and prevent the Heralds from being wiped out altogether. So there you have it, an oceanic world full of dinosaur-riding knights, rowdy pirates, blood-crazed vampire paladins, and tribalistic merfolk who have the power to bend the land to their will. Ixalan's got quite a lot going on, huh? Well, now that you more or less understand the parties involved in our 4-way plane-wide conflict, tune in next time, where we'll return to our favorite amnesiac mind mage, and delve properly into the story of Ixalan.